Hi, today I want to talk about our moral compass. How do we know what's right and what's wrong? That's what our moral compass can show us. And what can be really right for one person can be really wrong for another. What's absolutely disgusting in one culture can be okay in another. So it depends a lot on your perception, your programming, your background, your indoctrination. It all has a lot to do with how you perceive things. But I want to just give you some insights into something I discovered when I had that big healing years ago, back in the 70s, and a doctor wanted to do surgery on me, but I had a spiritual healing. Now, I realize that in order to shift your consciousness into the higher realm, the Christ consciousness, that level of consciousness where you can solve problems and perform miracles and impact the three-dimensional world, because it's a different frequency that corrects things. In order to get there, you usually have to have a tremendous shock to your system, a shock that puts you in a place where you're up against the wall and you cannot figure out a solution. So you surrender. When you surrender to the God within you, that divine inner power that you have, because you realize you're not going to get a solution in the three-dimensional world. You have no other choice. That's when you have an experience that we sometimes call, you can become reborn. You become a new person. You shift into a different level of consciousness. Nothing is the same ever again, because you get a glimpse of the whole idea that you really are divine, and you have these amazing powers within you because you're the reflection of God. Well, when that happened to me, not only did it solve the problem that I was dealing with instantaneously, had a healing, but everything changed. For about a year, everywhere I went, the world looked different. I had more abilities to see things from a different level of consciousness. Basically, I became more psychic, more intuitive. I was living more in flow. Things were happening more effortlessly for me. It wasn't like all my problems disappeared, though. I was still living in the three-dimensional world. But one of the big ahas that I had was that I didn't realize it until I had this awakening that I had believed in false gods. Of course, I always thought I believed in one God, but I really didn't. I had a God for romance. I had a God for money. I had a God for anger. I had a God for possessions. These were all false gods that I was worshiping depending on what I was focusing on at the time. And it would become my main event. You know, it was over and above knowing that I was one with that one God, which is one mind, one everything. And I had lost sight of that. I never really experienced it until I started to see clearly that I had all these false gods. Not only was that made aware to me, but I also had this sense that I had this big knot in my consciousness, and it needed to become untangled. It was like a Gordian knot sitting above my head. And as it became loosened, untangled, and I began to see things from a different point of view, and it was my beliefs. I would look at a belief and it would just start to dissolve. I would realize it was just a belief that I had. And as these things started to unravel and dissolve, and I could see things more clearly, I began to realize that I was becoming a different person. And I realize now that the more ways that I found to live closer to God, the more pronounced these changes became. And it's a shift in consciousness. Right now, we're going through the Great Awakening. So many people are going to be put in a situation where they'll go, I don't know what to do. they realize that things aren't as they appear to be, or they're up against the wall trying to make a decision about what to do, where to go, what's next. And just like I had to do back in my 20s, I had to decide material world or spiritual world. I took the spiritual, I took that leap, and I didn't know if I was going to land on the other side. It's pretty scary when you do it. But if you take the leap of faith, I guarantee you will learn that you are amazing. And that's really what the Great Awakening is all about, taking the leap and leaving the old behind, the old beliefs, the old perceptions, and stepping into the spiritual dimension where you can actually solve problems and live life much more harmoniously. It's a good way to go.